Hello.
Howdy.
Give it one more minute.
Are you in charge, Jeremy? Because I want share screen.
Yeah, I'm doing that right now. Slowly.
No problem. I had some like Zoom needing more like Mac OS permissions recently too, so I want to make sure I don't need to change anything on my side.
You should have screen sharing now.
Okay, here we go.
And we can get started. Laura, you have the agenda.
Cool. I'll take the opportunity to do Paul's normal welcome to today, Tuesday, March 8th episode of SIG Multicluster. I have taken over the floor because I've also taken over the agenda, but happy to, sorry, my Zoom just did something weird while hopefully you all can still hear me.
In hear and see your screen.
Okay, great. I can't see any of you then, but that's okay. Okay, so yeah, I've taken over the agenda, but should be kind of short if people have other topics later. Okay, so I wanted to give some KEP updates from my perspective. I know Jeremy talked last time about how we're trying to move everything towards the next steps for graduation. Feels like the constant uphill battle, but there are some recent updates, so I just want to make sure everybody knows. So for cluster ID, me and Tim Hawken are still negotiating on the API review, but I think we're very close. I did want to highlight that the main discussion on this point has been about max length and everyone's favorite Unicode and character encoding. If you would like to read a long and involved story about that, there's a sort of comments here and like a bunch of like gists linked to, because we wanted to test some things empirically, especially if you have any like prior experience with the OpenAPI v3 specification or CRD development for something for fields that were strings. If you have some insider comments or just want to like +1 or demon emoji on it or something, I would really appreciate it if anybody has that perspective, just so that we can get some more points of view. And I want to shout out to Ishmeet. I don't know if she's in the call right now, but she's been helping with the actual CRD implementation. So we've been working on the KubeBuilder implementation of the actual cluster ID, which is also what enabled me to easily test all this stuff that me and Tim are talking about. So highlighting that for multi-cluster DNS, this has had a lot of back and forth with SIG Network, and the latest review were quote unquote just nits, which are also in. I have actually a meeting with Tim later too, because he couldn't make it today to go after that LGTM. If you want to have sort of the shortest version of what the latest change list, I guess, is in this long process, this comment represents the most material things besides other like formatting nits that were handled. So yeah, that's all informational. And then in terms of actual next steps, again, both of these are between me and Tim right now. So I'm meeting with him later, and I think we are pretty good on that.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'll pause briefly for any other comments because the two others are more like open debate process things outside of the KEPs. Okay. So two kind of just random, maybe not super random curveballs, but just two thoughts I've been having, especially while talking with other people about various things. So one is there's this PRR questionnaire, which here, this part, which some people here may have interacted with, which is a questionnaire that any CAP is required to fill out and get a PRR reviewer, which is like a subset of people similar to API review who can give the LGTM on this. And I'm just wondering, whoops, sorry, over here. I'm just wondering if now or in the future, there's any interest or thought about putting in any questions about how future enhancements to Kubernetes as a whole, what it's thought about what that means for multi-cluster deployments. And yeah, I kind of just want to open the floor of if this has been, maybe ask the lore people if this has been discussed before, if we don't think this is a good place to put this, if we never think this is a good place to put this, etc. I don't know that we really need to take action now, but want to get a temperature on that.
I think that sounds pretty cool. I don't know, like, I like the idea a lot. I don't know exactly what it would look like. I'm not sure it's been discussed before.
Okay.
Certainly, but if it was before my time in the SIG.
Right.
But I think we should think about what that would actually mean.
Yeah.
I know it was purposefully an open-ended question, but
Right.
what kind of question might we ask there? Like, just, is it like, is this a multi-cluster feature? Could this be a multi-cluster feature? Or how would this be a multi-cluster feature if we want to start spurring thought in that direction?
Yeah.
I do like this idea.
Yeah, and one thing that I feel both was, how do I say? So for example, kind of the current flagship project of SIG Multicluster is MCS, and it's optional. And I think a lot of other multi-cluster projects too historically have been optional or add-ons, but they are still, like native upstream. So there's just an interesting interaction compared to the other types of things that are asked on this specific questionnaire, that is about like really general, always true to a cluster, like feature enablement or like upgrades and rollout and monitoring. So I'm just wondering if that has an impact on any decision we as SIG Multicluster might make about what, if we put a question that's like, have you thought about multi-cluster? That might be really like general and non-informative to somebody who doesn't, know of those specific projects, and especially if the perspective is that, oh, they're add-ons, so it doesn't matter or something,
Yeah. I really like this in terms of helping projects think about, like, MCS is a good example. If we look at other changes, I think networking is most likely to cause immediate issues, but
Right.
There's the network policy working group right now, and they're coming up with new plans. Is this gonna step on multi-cluster?
Right.
Like, yes, I think multi-cluster will, for the foreseeable future, be made up of add-on features in the community, but they still shouldn't break because some new in-tree feature rolls out. And I think that might be worth a checkpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if nothing else, it might be a good, like, fundamentally this PRR questionnaire is about like process. And so this might just be a good place to throw that in there. And I don't, what am I trying to say? That all of us members of SIG Multicluster, we don't have the temperature on everything going on in every other SIG, right? And we might get lucky if we know enough in a given space, or if things move slow enough that we can catch up. But this might help prevent some things falling through the cracks solely just in the form of, while someone's filling this out because they have to anyways, they're like, oh, SIG Multicluster cares about stuff, or we could be like, grepping these PRRs where people say what they say. It's just another place that we can keep a pulse on it and follow up on things. That's more formalized than what I think we have now, which requires a lot of knowledge into what each individual SIG is doing, or representatives in each SIG who are on the lookout for multi-cluster
Yeah,
concerns.
I like it. Maybe we can get a brainstorming doc going with like a sample question
Yeah.
or a few and share it with the list.
Make a brainstorming doc. Yeah, I happen to have recently filled this out, so I have an idea of what types of things get asked on it. And also that's why I thought it was a good spot for us to be. But I'll also just encourage anybody to take a look at these questions if you want sort of the backstory of what they are like, and then I will do that. I'll send out a brainstorming doc where we can combine, our goal, which I think is make sure future enhancements to upstream Kubernetes single cluster, not break, SIG multi-cluster supported, multi-cluster add-ons, and also make it easier for people to, for us to keep tabs on what's going on, given our obligation to maintain multi-cluster compatibility in upstream.
Awesome.
Cool. Anybody else have a pressing thought on this topic before I move to the next one? Okay, bam, 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 right on to number 3. So this is also kind of related, which is just that I observe that, there's a lot of SIG network, SIG MC overlap right now, particularly about things that like compatibility with SIG network projects. And again, like, how to say, like, I know that MCS itself required a lot of interaction, and I came in a little bit later where that link was very well established. So maybe this is already the way that process goes well, but I have just talked a little bit to people about, is there a need, since we have a larger number of related proposals going on right now, to have like a more formalized check-in between SIG network and SIG MC. Right now, I think that there's basically representatives from both who go to both meetings. So on the one hand, I don't want to make like another meeting for just those people, I guess, and take up time of their day. But yeah, I just wanted to get people's opinions on if they see a need for something more formalized like this for a time period while there's a lot of changes coming down the pipeline for SIG network that affect multi-cluster.
So working groups tend to be kind of, I believe it's actually like in the charter that they are
right,
time bounded and for a specific purpose. So in general, I definitely like the idea, but I wonder if it should be, if we wanted a like working group between SIGNet and SIGMC, would it be better to pile into like network policy, for example,
right,
or
right.
like what are the specific goals? I think if it's just here's a joint meeting, then since we have so many people who attend both already, I don't know how much that helps, but obviously love to hear anybody who has other opinions. But if we have like a specific goal here, like figuring out network policy or figuring out multi-network, I think those are pretty good candidates.
Yeah, those are
Paul has a hand.
basically, yeah. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
So here's a signpost for that I think would indicate that we need to have like a recurring joint thing, is if we continue to refer to like SIG network in this SIG over and over again, and like vice versa, probably it means that we need like a joint place to talk, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like the first sort of like, I don't know how to say it, like flags of that have kind of occurred where like when we were talking about multi-cluster network policy or multi-network, like we would discuss the documents here and we'd be like, oh, we're having this conversation over in SIG network, or this is pending this conversation in SIG network, or I went to SIG network this week and blah, 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 that type of thing. So that's where it like started to feel like it was trending that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those felt like little, signs, but I don't
Right,
know
and-
that they're enough themselves.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense, Laura. I think it makes sense that you raise it and its presence on the agenda is another sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, let's continue paying attention to it.
Cool. And
I think policy, well, both multi-network and network policy are kind of exactly the types of problems that working groups are generally formed to solve. Like we have a specific goal, bring us together the SIGs. Seems like a pretty good candidate.
Cool. Okay.
But I want to throw out too, I believe there's already a network policy working group.
Right.
So
right.
So the question is, should we just
hang out there?
be joining that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess like we don't need to like make a grid of everybody's attendance, but I don't know, like I personally come to this meeting based regularly and not the other one. So I feel less aware of what's going on, or I feel like it's disjointed. But if a like strong enough group, you know, is already in all of those places, then, you know, maybe I just need to show up to all of those if that's how it is going forward. I think definitely a like direct action item here is if this is something that, you know, generally it sounds like there's some, you know, how to say, like maybe interest in it, and then I personally am interested in it, so I can go show up at the network policy meeting and get the temperature there, and then I'll have more information. Cool. Any other people on the call want to add in on this topic before I yield the floor? My Zoom is sucking right now, but I think Paul raised his hand still.
Oh,
Or is
well,
it
my
just
hand's
still
down.
open? Okay.
Hey,
But we
there
did
we
have a
go.
question
All
in
right.
chat.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not a good MC right now because my Zoom is freaking out. So that's cool. But I will yield the floor and to the question in chat from Iman, who is new to the SIG and has a question for the end. Feel free to come off mute if you want to ask yourself. But it's, is there any development roadmap for KubeFed?
Yeah, I am not actually currently aware of one. There were some projects, I think about 6 months ago in flight, but it does seem like work has stalled a bit. So I'm not currently aware of an updated roadmap from KubeFed. Paul, have you heard anything different?
No, I haven't heard anything different, and I have started asking myself the question: is it time to archive that project? It's been in a state that, like, full disclosure, I had my own hand in, like, at one point, a state of like, it will be beta real soon now for longer than the pandemic, at least. So I think it's better if it's not being actively developed, and I'm not sure that that's the case, but like, if there's really no roadmap, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to keep the project unarchived. But it's, you know, Jeremy, maybe you and I can take an action item to determine like if there's active development happening and like if there is a roadmap.
Yeah, we should do that. I think we need to figure this out and then archive it. And then if somebody were to want to run with it, you know, reach out. We would let the mailing list know as well. But yeah, if nothing's happening with it, that's probably a better home.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. One more chat comment. Michael +1, the specific project working groups. Gave an example, so that's good to know. I will incorporate that into the calculus. Anything else? Multi-cluster fans?
Hey, this is Li Qian from Azure. I have a question about following up the topic on gateway. So
Yeah.
now we have gateway plus MCS. So like I know gateway is for north-south traffic, then MCS is for east-west traffic. And based on what I observed that GKE actually put a MCS as backend for gateway. So I'm wondering what's the community's recommendation in terms of how we put them together and like how like the north, south, and east, west networking should work in the multi-cluster world.
So I think the Gateway API working group, speaking of working groups, basically came to that conclusion. We were pretty involved with them while speccing that out, but the thinking is that, you know, Gateway is the right API for north-south, and if you want multi-cluster backends, pointing at a service import instead of a service is a pretty reasonable, straightforward way to do that, because multi-cluster services already are the multi-cluster equivalent of a service. So if basically if your backend's a multi-cluster service, it should use the multi-cluster service equivalent. And so I think the community was kind of going that way, and that's why GKE did it. Folks from GKE were pretty involved in that community as well, and I think there was a lot of uptake. Of course, if there were any changes, like if you know, we're always open to discussion. If anybody doesn't like those patterns, then we can come up with new norms. But I think that is the recommendation.
I see, got it. So basically, the recommendation for connecting multi-cluster service as the backend for gateway is to use service imports as the backend.
That's right.
Cool. Thank you for the information.
Absolutely.
Is that something that needs to be like more clear?
Yeah, probably
Somewhere.
it was in some docs,
yeah.
but I don't know its current state in the API.
Right.
There were some good discussions in the Gateway working group about it, but
right. And Gateway API has like its own little website. And then I don't know how that intersects with the official Kubernetes documentation going forward, which I think is where people would expect to see that type of best practice.
This gets into the kind of interesting case of the SIG projects, because like MCS, Gateway API is an optional add-on, right?
Right.
And so that's why it has its own website.
We're going to get a really big matrix of optional things that aren't really optional.
Right. Maybe we are developing or we're starting to see that maybe we need a better solution, as CRDs are the path forward for
for all of upstream is exactly. So that's another interesting topic that I'm going to park.
So I also have another question about KubeFat. So we talked about that we don't have any development roadmap for it, and basically we are sunsetting it. Then as a community, what do we provide as an alternative, or we just gave up?
Right.
I want to make sure that I was clear. I did not mean to communicate that anything was going to happen with KubeFed. I wanted to indicate that I'm personally asking myself, should something happen? So what I mean by that is like, and I haven't, I may have spoken like too soon. That's possible, right? In the sense that I haven't gone and recently looked at like the state of the KubeFed repo, but if a project isn't any longer under active development and there's no roadmap, like it doesn't serve a lot of interest for anybody to keep the project open. And the intention of archiving it would be to indicate to people that it's not under active development. But to answer your question, about what would we provide instead of that? The answer might be nothing, right? one of the things that in the history of the SIG was a process that the SIG went through is refining the concept of what the SIG did from being very closely tied to the concept of like Kubernetes federation that was sort of conceived originally as something that was it had a lot of different jobs, that was kind of a monolith that would do X, Y, and Z thing on top of Kubernetes, toward things that are more specifically scoped and have only one job, or only, you know, like one functional area that they're over. So I am not personally of the opinion that it would necessarily be good to try to build another thing that did all of the things that KubeFed tried to do. I'm not sure, but I think that's the best answer I could provide right now. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's what came out.
Yeah, I totally agree that if a project is no longer active, we need to make it clear, because when we look at it initially, we also thought this is something people are actively working on. So I think Archivit will help people to understand what's the real status of the project without, watching all the community videos. And what I'm thinking about is that it seems that it's very hard to agree on a solution, but is it possible that we start to think about whether we can agree on additional APIs that can help different providers or different open source community to provide solutions? Because like, how do we represent a member of a multi-cluster? How do we do selections of those members? I think those APIs are kind of straightforward, and people probably it's easy to reach consensus. I mean, whether we should go towards that direction to have some common API so that all the providers can stay vendor neutral.
This to me is exactly the right question. Like what specific problems do we need to solve? I think you just threw out like a couple there that are much more targeted than KubeFed. Or another one that Paul and I and a few others have talked about a few times now is like helping with multi-cluster leader election. If you want to develop a multi-cluster controller, that seems like a really interesting problem, super useful. And if you want to use multi-cluster for HA, it kind of seems like a problem everybody's going to have. So if we can, I think the right path forward in the way that we've been taking the SIG is to figure out that list. Like what are the specific problems that we're seeing pop up on a bunch of different use cases, and can we just solve those?
Yeah, in the neighborhood, I'll just +1 to everything Jeremy said. I will throw out that like in the functional neighborhood of one of the things that is like in the scope of what KubeFed attempted to do is spreading resources around. And one of the other things that is like in the neighborhood of things that the SIG has invested some time in is the work API. I would say that's probably the closest point of continuity, like as far as other work within the SIG to what KubeFed mostly does. But that one also, I think there's a question of are there enough people interested in the work API to continue developing that? So that's one you may want to take a look at if you're interested in APIs that can be vendor neutral. That certainly checks that box, checks the functional neighborhood of KubeFed box. Might be worth taking a look at. I did reach out to Chojen some time back and asked if that was still under development or if there were any updates, and he indicated to me that it was, but I'd really like to get an update in a SIG meeting about work API so that we can at least understand what the current state of that stuff is.
Yeah, thank you for the suggestion. We do work with the children and the OCM folks closely on the work API and follow their progress in that end.
Okay,
I do
great.
have an update on the work API. We just recently made a enhancement request on it. If anyone has some feedback, please go ahead. And thank you, Honkai, for the feedback so far. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. I personally have to drop here. Have a great day, everybody.
Hi,
Yeah,
Paul.
Paul.
I may be overdoing it on the notes, but I'm wildly trying to capture all this. So if I'm missing anything,
Laura, this is awesome. Thank you.
yeah, I don't know if this is all TMI, but
No, this is
I
great. So
naturally
I've always
fell
thought
into
it's
this.
I've always thought it's really funny that we call this meeting notes and it's really just the agenda.
Right. Okay, cool.
This is probably the first time in over a year where it's actually been meeting notes, which is better, I think.
Okay, good.
Period. With that, does anyone have anything else they want to bring up? All right. Well, then I think we will call it a day. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Laura. That was some great discussion. I will see you all in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and feel free to update the notes if I missed anything.
Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Bye.